Olá, bom dia! Começamos agora o segundo dia do webinário Floresta e Negócios.
Webinar, Forest and Business, Good Practices Between Brazil and Europe. This discussion started yesterday with the participation of Brazilian companies and also companies from Europe, talking about deforestation-free value chains. Today we'll talk about sustainable development. This webinar is organized by the Amsterdam Declaration Partnerships. Do you know what this partnership is about? Let us watch a video about the ADP. The partnership was created in 2015 in parallel to the Paris Agreement, and it was comprised by 9 countries: France, Belgium, Denmark, Italy, Dutchland, Netherlands, Spain, and the United Kingdom. The objective is to reach sustainable production and deforestation-free production in the world. The declaration promotes the coordination of policies and synergies between the initiatives of the producing countries and the supply chains. Brazil hosts 6 biomes that cover 61% of the 8.5 million square kilometers of the country. Concrete initiatives show that it is possible to invest, produce, innovate, and profit, protecting the forest. Together, we built a deforestation-free trade.
Hoje vamos analisar as boas práticas.
Today we will assess the good practices of the banks and investors of Brazil and Europe to ensure whether financial support is contributing to deforestation or not. For this discussion, we will count on the presence of Carolina Lert, responsible for the Santander Sustainability Department, Eminiciel, with Store Brand, Professor Raul Rachon, the Director of the Environmental Services and Management of the Federal University of Minas Gerais, José Poucas, the Chief of Social Responsibility and Environmental Issues of the JGP, and Henrique Peterson, Chief of the Norway Department for Sustainability. This seminar is being transmitted into idioms, English and Portuguese, and you can select your idiom on your own YouTube platform, and you can also participate and ask questions through our chat. Financial support allows for the creation and implementation of large-scale economic projects, and when these projects cause deforestation, financial institutions also can be questioned. In July 2020, the 3 largest Brazilian private banks, Bradesco, Santander, and Itaú, presented a joint plan to support sustainable development in the Amazon, especially through the implementation of sustainable value chains. In the following months, these 3 banks supported explicitly the objective of contributing to eradication of deforestation. Today, we welcome Carolina Lert, responsible for the field of sustainability of the Santander Bank in Brazil. Santander, that is present in many continents, has been taking action against deforestation in the Americas and supporting reforestation in Europe. Good morning, Carolina. How does Santander see the matter of protection of the forest, and what are the results you have reached? Good morning, Fernanda. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of participating in this meeting. I would like to greet my fellow panelists. Thank you all. Fernanda, I think you already have mentioned the point of the Amazon plan, so I'm going to give you an overview of what we have done within this plan in the past year. In July 2020, we launched this plan, and we started to understand better this biome, this territory. A territory that used to be better served by the public by public plants rather than private. So we needed to approach this territory to understand it better. So we committed to 10 measures. All of them have All of them have as pillars non-deforestation, but some are specific regarding deforestation, which is measure one about uh, frozen poultry, meat, etc., and how to deal with this food item with more responsibility towards the environment. We also are engaged in the themes of sustainable value chains and bioeconomy. So in these topics, we're taking important steps and starting to support cooperatives, agri-industry and producers of sustainable local cultures. And here we like to say that this is not traditional agribusiness, so that we do not get confused with a large scale agribusiness. We're talking about local specific cultures with their own specific modes of production that have to do with family agriculture and so on, so that we can deal with these cultures and treat them in their own specific manner. And also we support land regularization, which is also very important to us. And we managed in this first year, we managed to deliver an important work where we mapped the legislation of the states in the Amazon region, and in order to deliver results in land regularization to the government. So this is what we did in the occupation of the Amazon. And this is, so the idea is for us to be increasingly capable as a financial institution to support our clients that are in this region, and that act for non-deforestation and that see forests as part of their businesses. So the idea is for us to be prepared for this. We have made a few incursions in agribusiness models and sustainable models, in, and also have taken an important step, that is the creation of a trade network dedicated to the theme of the Amazon. So we have 4 states, Roraima, Acre, and Amazonas, who have in their DNA, they have a DNA of business um, that are specifically, we have directed our specific actions to this region, doubling our presence in the region. So what I can tell you is that we're preparing. This is a work in progress, but we are taking daily steps to be the bank that this territory deserves in its size and territory. Carolina, the increase of deforestation in Brazil, not only in this region, but in Brazil as a whole and all of the biomes, is it a risk to the bank? What impact does the forest degradation have in your activities? Certainly, you have already given the answer in your question. This is a risk to Brazil. It is a risk to any company that operates in Brazil. It is a risk to the banks. First of all, it is a risk to the banks because if we are in some way linked to businesses that promote deforestation, there is a question of reputation. I would probably have a problem with regarding loans with these clients soon, but this is completely against our vocation, our mission of promoting sustainable businesses through, or sustainability through businesses. So this is one of the greatest risks that we face today, being associated to deforestation, as we are the largest European bank in Brazil, given the importance of the leadership of Europe in the vision of what our future society will be, green economy, social economy, the economy as a whole in the next few years, doubtlessly. So the idea is that we will not only mitigate risks, because we're no longer talking about an era where we ask the client whether they are deforestation, or I catch them doing something and I will cancel their credit. Well, this doesn't happen. Well, it does, but what we're doing is try to transform the entire chains, how the banks can contribute to keep forests standing rather than on the ground. Regarding this multifaceted contribution, Santander is a member of the Brazil Coalition of Climate, Forest and Agriculture that congregates 300 companies and banks. So what is your relationship with the nonprofits? Our relationship with nonprofits is a virtuous relationship, I would say to you, because in Brazil especially, there is a close relationship. We have a close relationship with them. They are they're clear guides to our actions. And when we look at Europe, we look at the nonprofits that are headquartered in Europe, and we see that there is a different level of critical thinking and even a knowledge of the practices that we are trying to implement. We have seen them often questioning us, but in Brazil, if you know the nonprofits that work with us here, they work alongside with us and help us really guide our steps towards where we can improve our business further towards non-deforestation. So we have a very good relationship with nonprofits in Brazil. Carolina, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you. So along with the banks, the development funds also have an essential role in the support or rejection of certain sectors. Founded in the 18th century, the Norwegian Storebrand Investment Fund is one of the oldest financial institutions of Northern Europe. They have gained great visibility last year in Brazil, especially when they mobilized a group of foreign investors to question the federal government about the increase in deforestation. So now we will have Emin Isiel, the Chief of Climate and Environment of Storebrand. She participates in a webinar in English. Emin Isiel, how does store branding do to ensure that your investments do not contribute to further deforestation?
Thank you, Fernanda. First of all, I can hear myself in echo. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me in the panel and for everyone who's listening in. As you said, I come from Storebrand Asset Management. We are Norway's largest private asset manager. And exactly 3 years ago, we set a commitment to have deforestation-free portfolios by 2025. And today, I would like to focus on 2 issues. I would like to explain why we set this commitment and how we're implementing it. So let's start with the why. Why do investors care about deforestation? And my colleague Carol from Santander already explained this. If you look from a pure climate and biodiversity lens, ending deforestation is, of course, the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do from a financial perspective. Deforestation is a systemic risk which has the potential to collapse entire economies and industries. And it poses different financial risk to our portfolios. Carol mentioned reputational, but it also poses physical risk and regulatory risk. And I'll give you an example. Currently, we're experiencing a tightening of the regulatory framework in Europe. The EU proposal, which is on the table now, sets clear requirements for European companies to demonstrate that products they import are not linked to deforestation. Let's say you're a car company in Germany. You need to make sure that the leather used is not linked to deforestation. So the new proposal from the EU will make it more difficult for commodities such as soy, beef, and leather from Brazil to enter the European market. This will create financial risk for non-compliant companies, both in the EU and Brazil. And similar law has been proposed and passed in the UK. And if commitments from Glasgow is to be realized, we expect other countries and regions to follow suit as well. So that is why we do it, because it's a financial risk to our portfolios. And let's turn to the how. From the why we do it to the how. How do we do it? How do we achieve deforestation-free portfolios? So there are 2 keywords. The first one is data, and the second one is level of traceability. The first task for every investor is to map our portfolios and identify investee companies that are linked to deforestation. This is, of course, not straightforward exercise. In Storebrand, we are invested in 5,000 companies globally. And deforestation and supply chains are very complex and data is missing. But it's still possible with existing tools and databases to identify companies with high deforestation risk. In our case, we have combined 2 tools. One is called Forest 500, which is self-reported data. The other one is called Trace. It's satellite data. Through this analysis, we have identified 50 companies that are linked to deforestation with high deforestation risk. And we are already in dialogue with these companies. We have set out clear expectations, and the level of traceability is the most important. It can reflect whether a company is able to comply with its own commitment or not. And we expect companies to demonstrate that they're able to trace their suppliers, both direct and indirect. And many companies currently are not able to demonstrate this. Especially with moving commodities such as cattle, this has been extremely challenging. There's a farm which produces the calf, and there's another one which raises it, and there's a third one fattening it. Basically, there's a huge lack of information to monitor indirect suppliers. But we see that some states, such as the state of Pará, has made important advances. So we would like to continue to support economic development in Brazil, and we would like to support companies to improve their sustainability practices. And our experiences show that we can make important advances working closely with companies. But we also realize that investors and companies alone can't end deforestation. Governments need to create that enabling environment for us. And Brazil has a good long-term record of combating deforestation while at the same time providing favorable conditions for business and investment. But this has unfortunately been challenged over the recent year. And that is why Storebrand, together with a large group of global investors, have been in dialogue with the Brazilian government over the past year. We have raised concerns over increasing rates of deforestation. We have urged the government to strengthen public access to data, improve traceability, to allow us as investors to demonstrate that our investments are not linked to deforestation, because we need to comply with upcoming legislation and sustainability standards. And the recent official data from INPE shows an increase in 22% deforestation from previous year. And this is the highest figure since 2006. As we speak, there are discussions in the Congress regarding 2 proposed laws, which has made international headlines, as there are concerns that these will weaken environmental policies and drive further deforestation. And increasing deforestation combined with proposed bills which seem to weaken environmental policies are creating uncertainties about conditions for investing in Brazil for international investors. So I think I'll stop here.
Você falou desse diálogo que vocês propuseram ao governo brasileiro de colocar nessa questão do desmatamento.
Light to this question of deforestation. So how is this dialogue today between you and these investment funds and the Brazilian government?
Yes, so we have, I could hear myself in echo again, sorry. So we initiated, Storebrand initiated a dialogue with the Brazilian government last year due to the escalating rates of deforestation. And since then, we have been in dialogue with government authorities, both in the Congress, at the subnational level, but within the current government as well, and the Amazon Council, to raise some of our concerns. We have discussed, as I said, the figures that I was referring to, the INPE figures. We have been in discussion about the proposed bills and government budget, because we would of course like to be invested in Brazil, but there are these figures are creating some concerns for international and national investors.
The Brazilian government in the past weeks, such as elimination of deforestation by 2028, carbon neutrality by 2050, do these commitments reduce Brazilian environmental risks to the investors?
So I couldn't get the question, but you're asking if the commitment from Glasgow will reduce the rates in deforestation.
Whether the commitments taken by the Brazilian government will reduce risks to your investments.
Well, commitments are fine, but they need to be translated into concrete action. And currently, the figures are showing 22% deforestation rate from previous year. So we need to see action on the ground.
Thank you very much for your participation in our seminar. It's been a pleasure having you. So in these 2 first presentations, we could see the technical challenge that traceability of deforestation can represent. And among the methods and tools, very interesting ones developed here in Brazil, we highlight the work of the lab of environmental services management by the Federal University of Minas Gerais. And now we would like to invite the director of the lab, Professor Raoni Rajão, to talk about this program called Green Seal, or green certification, developed by his team and now in implementation in the state of Pará. If you who are following our seminar have any questions, send them to us through our YouTube chat, and those that are not answered within the time of the seminar will be forwarded to our participants.
Good morning, Professor. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. Could you please explain us how these mechanisms of traceability and the challenges present in this methodology work? Well, yes. Well, first of all, there are challenges which are technological, because they deal of systems that need to analyze individually each rural producer, not only checking the deforestation, but also the level of legality of that endeavor. Because if we notice, for example, today what is being demanded by the international markets and the legislation proposed by the European, and what was said in the Declaration China, United States, they want to ban illegalities. It means to have a system that is capable to interpret the laws automatically and supply this information to banks, investors, and purchases for the whole chain. Another major challenge is the integration of data, which will allow to check the situation of that farm specifically, but the purchases that that farm made, the so-called indirect suppliers. Because we've seen in a growing fashion, especially in the cattle raising, that producers who are deforesting and trying to escape from the control of the government and visualizing only the suppliers they are in touch with, they actually sometimes they make us to go around in a circle, and so that's why I have to go to all farms one by one to check it out. That's why the integration of data, especially an important data, which is the guide of animal transportation, which was thought for sanitation purposes, but has a major importance for environmental purposes. It is possible to use. So we did this study, we created this methodology, and it was published at Science last year. It was an article that had a lot of repercussion. And we brought this proposal to transform the article into a system for different states and federal governments. And we had an extremely positive welcome from the government of Pará, because Pará, on one side, it is a state that has the highest levels of deforestation in Brazil, but there is a large number of producers who do not deforest. 80% of the rural farms in Pará did not deforest. So we have to create a system to separate one thing from another. And at the same time, we can exclude and incentivize the environmental legalization, all of those who are being illegal. You're talking that the Green Seal was welcome in Pará, but what about in a national level? This mechanism was criticized, or has it been criticized? Well, we did have a good welcome in Pará and also in the state of Tocantins during the COP26 in Glasgow. We announced that they announced they are adopting this Green Seal. There is an alpha version being tested, and it has advanced, and several other states have sought us. We keep an open dialogue on a national level with the technical body, and we have a bill of law in partnership with the Congressman José Silva to bring it to a national level. However, we still have we don't have this the same demand by the federal government, and we understand that a system such as this in a national level would benefit everyone. What are the human resources and materials you would need to implement this in the whole country? Well, in fact, it is a project that is relatively cheap and also with a very low maintenance. What it does is to give transparency to data which are already official, and they are mandatory data that are collected by the government systematically. This is the authorization for deforestation, the impediments. This is a data of traceability that already exists and is being collected for animal defense purposes. the list of slave labor, some of them are public and some of them are not. But for example, the guide of animal transportation is not public. It is not a data that you can get easily, but it is extremely important. And also there is a problem. The disparity of this information is spread in several databases. When they are integrated, you have a system that costs very low. We're talking about a few million reais to be able to develop something that will serve a major infrastructure for the growth of the country in the next coming years. That's why I understand that today the main obstacle to amplify this model is a political will. What we have, the decision makers in key positions, for example, within the Congress, are not really looking to the agribusiness as a whole. They do not believe in what we say, that there is a concrete demand of free deforestation. And they believe that the world will keep buying from Brazil independently of the deforestation rate. So this negation, this denial is actually what is the major impediment. Professor Raoni Rajon, thank you very much and congratulations for the Green Seal. Thank you for your participation. Last month, diplomats, companies, NGOs, and politicians from all over the world gathered in Glasgow for COP26. Among the major declarations signed then, one echoes the topic of our webinar, the commitment signed by more than 30 investment funds to eliminate deforestation connected to agriculture from their investment portfolio until 2025. Among them is the Brazilian fund JGP. Mr. Pugas is the Chief of Social Responsibility and Environment at JGP. Good morning. Good morning. Good to be with you. Okay, it's a pleasure to be with you. How does the fund identify the risks of deforestation and what are the results you have noticed so far? Well, it does have a complexity that is quite strategic.
Tanto tecnologias, como a Emine havia mencionado,
Trace and Force 500, but also adopting partnerships such as Fair Initiative and in partnerships with NGOs, Brazilian NGOs, and the academia. We know that the eyes of the financial market are limited. So we need to have this expansion in alliances and partnerships to have a critical reading of the level of deforestation and the loss of biodiversity we have with some economic activities. Brazil has developed historically a civil society that is very active and organized, which has a fabulous production of knowledge, intelligence, and content. And the financial market was very far away from this for a long time. We absorbed this content to allow a more intelligent decision-making. We obviously believe in the public data, but we also want to have access to private data, be them delivered by data providers, as was mentioned, the Trace, for example, but we also want to listen to those who are on the field, who are actually inside the militants or social environmental activities to qualify the data, which is nothing more than a number. And there's just a mathematical element. So we need a narrative for this. With this surveillance about the deforestation on the quantitative point of view and the qualitative point of view, will allow to identify zones of risk. And here we're talking about supply chains all the way to sectors and full territories of production. In the absence of data, we have to presume the worst, and unfortunately is what has happened very frequently in our analysis. The lack of traceability, lack of access to quality data, and from public data from the federal government end up actually hindering us to develop a better solution. With regards to deforestation, we have to be very conservative. We have to imagine that we have to make decisions to protect the environment, not only for now, but for the next generations. So the absence of transparency for us ends up being as a behavior that opens conditions for non-friendly activities towards the environment. Lucas, are many the Brazilian investors who share this concern with the risk of deforestation? Unfortunately not. We wish it was more. We do have a growing community, it is a fact, and that's good, but we want it to be a full community, and we have very few exceptions to this division. I believe that this is due to a technological illiteracy with regards to how to monitor these risks, but also due to a certain negationism for environmental risks, because they are financial risks for the companies. They present existential risks for the continuity of sectors. So there's still no connection in there. We're talking about regulatory compliance, and there's not just a regulatory compliance. There is an effect of a sector obsolescence. And they don't really know this. And we do have a separation in Brazil, especially in the agribusiness, that the world awaken. There is urgency for the climate changes, and it's up to us to be the protagonists of this transformation, or to be the victims by obsolescence, economic obsolescence in this new cycle of global capitalism. Do you follow up these Brazilian companies that do not want to be victims of this obsolescence? Do you follow these companies that want to get rid of the deforestation practices? Yes, we do have a very enthusiastic engagement. We like to be close to these companies, especially because we have a very inclusive point of view. We believe that, as we say, this is an issue of environmental literacy for the commitment with the future. We do have the role of evangelizing these companies and bringing them to the best practices. We know that not all of them will reach this green economy, but our responsibility as pioneers in this new boundary of ESG is to bring as many companies as possible for this new model of green production. So our dream is not to be the only signatories of commitments, but to be another one from a full collection, a universal collection in Brazil committed to deforestation-free practices and the inclusion, social economic inclusion based in this new green economy. José Pugas, thank you very much for your participation. It has been a pleasure. Now I pass the floor to Henrique Pedersen, Chief of Responsible Investment from Nordea, and a Danish company that deals with investments. This fund has received a lot of attention from the Brazilian press because they actually wanted to get rid of JBS. The participation of Mr. Pedersen also will be in English.
Thank you, Fernanda, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think we have an echo again. Can you do something about that? Is it fixed? Well,
it's a pleasure having you with us. I would like to ask you, what are the challenges to investments from foreign investors in Brazil regarding deforestation, and what are the strategies that Nordea has developed?
Yeah, so we have developed a lot of the same methodologies that Mr. Pugas was referring to. We look at all the data we can get, we engage with companies, and of course we follow the legislation. So I think I would pick up on what Emina mentioned, but also Mr. Pugas and Professor Rajao, that there is this perception of investment risk on our side and from our investors, which is to begin with, it's more of a sort of a general environmental risk. It's the climate, it's deforestation as concepts. But recently, and with this new legislation that is now being passed by the European Union and which will come probably also in the United States and so on, where certification is required for the import of commodities from exporters such as Brazil, suddenly the risk to our portfolios from investments in Brazilian companies and even in the Brazilian government bonds, because of course the government depends on receipts of foreign exchange from exports. It depends on taxes that it can raise from the companies that export these goods. That is becoming a very clear and very substantial financial risk, because now to get good dividends, that we want those companies to do well for their owners, including ourselves. So I think a certification system like the one that Professor Rajao has been working on is exactly what is needed. And the more national it can be and the more uniform it can be, the more effective it will also be. So getting a system like that up and running, having those policies in place, like the Green Seal, that is a first step. And then very, very important is also the due diligence that you then do afterwards on an ongoing basis. So I think that there can be an independent organization doing this, but you know, by far the best would be if the Ministry of the Environment or some other government organism had the power to enforce this, that there were severe penalties for fraud for this type of certification system, and that there was simply enough environmental police and enough severe punishments for those who frauded the system, that you would be able to keep to avoid any kind of incidents that would erode the trust and the confidence in the system, because it's very, very important to retain the integrity of the system, to have the trust, so that the European Union authorities and the authorities of other importing countries will recognize that seal as being enough for Brazilian exporters to be able to access the markets. So I think we welcome the commitment of the leading Brazilian banks, including Santander, of course, but also Bradesco and others in Brazil, Itaú, going into and you know, making commitments here, and we hope that they can support a system like this, because we think that is exactly what is needed.
Mr. Pedersen, no ano passado, a Nordea desfez-se de 40 milhões de dólares em ações da JBS.
Last year, $640 million of stock, JBS stock, were sold due to the lack of trust in their certification process or their non-deforestation techniques. How are you doing to make sure that your imports are obeying to certification or to non-deforestation techniques?
Yeah, of course. It's very in the absence, we have an excellent. Can you, yes, okay, thank you. So in the absence of a system like the Green Seal, a national system like this, and it's good to see that Pará and some other states are looking at this, but in the absence of a national system, it's very difficult. So we can only try and collect data from different sources, from international data providers, from satellite data, like Storban mentioned. and see, and then we can have dialogues with the companies, and we do. So we have engagement with companies, and in some cases those are very good engagements. We have investments in a few of the companies in the pulp and paper industry that were featured on the panel yesterday, where we have good dialogues, but we have also had some examples of bad dialogues. And you mentioned one company where we finally divested, and ironically, a short while after we decided to leave this dialogue, this company came out with some targets regarding the tracking of cattle using blockchain. And is that then enough? I think commitments like that are good, and I think it's a little bit the same as with the commitments at COP. That it's very good to have commitments, but you also need something to happen in the short term, and you need to have this infrastructure that, for example, the Green Seal could be to guarantee or to give a sort of credibility to those commitments, because otherwise there is a risk that it is seen as just words, and especially when data on deforestation really points the other way. So that's been one of the challenges with the dialogue that we've had, especially at the government level, that we have seen that there is willingness to address the issue, but then we have seen that the data on the ground has been quite disappointing. So there really is a need for action here.
Mr. Pedersen, os dados têm mostrado em outra direção, como o senhor acabou de falar. E que impacto essas recentes evoluções aqui no Brasil, o aumento do
impact of these the deforestation, the increase in deforestation in 2021? What can this cause in terms of your investment in Brazil?
I think I don't want to be too concrete, but I can say that it increases the risk profile of especially the sovereign bonds, but also of companies that do not show a commitment to improve their position. There are other companies that definitely do, and I would even say that those more progressive companies, those companies who recognize the long-term risk from deforestation, sometimes they even have to make an extra effort because they are doing it against the background of a perception, at least in some parts of the world, that there really isn't very much being done. So I think there is this challenge, so that those who want to stand out, they have to go the extra mile to stand out positively, and some of them do. And you had some of them on your panel also yesterday, and so. Really, it increases the risk. So when we look at it from a risk return point of view, it's simply that any investment has to have this balance between risk and the return that you can expect, and the attractiveness of the investment on other parameters. And when the risk increases, the likelihood that some other investment might be more attractive also increases.
Eric Pedersen, muito obrigada pela sua participação.
Mr. Pedersen, for your participation. It's been a pleasure having you with us in our webinar.
Thank you so much, Fernanda.
Now we will have a message from the Danish Ambassador, Mr. Nikolai Pitz, also who has succeeded the French president in the chair of the ADP. Hello, my name is Nikolai Pitz. Denmark is proud to take over the presidency of the ADP in 2022. We are aligned with the objectives of sustainable development, the SDGs, with the New York Declaration of Development and the UN strategy for the protection of strategies, as well as the global landmark for biodiversity protection by 2020. Also, we are aligned with an important priority, Danish priority, our own goals for sustainable green growth, and our goals for deforestation. In January this year, the ADP partners renewed their commitment in promoting sustainability in agriculture through the elimination of deforestation regarding agricultural production, commodities, production, and through our partnership with consumer and producing parties in countries, with all the producers in the production chain. It's important to highlight that the work of the ADP is focused firstly and mainly on partnerships. And it consists on the joint work of private and public stakeholders working together coherently according to the role and responsibility that they have undertaken. This includes the partner industry, civil society, government of the producing countries, and the consuming countries. I am very happy to be here participating in this webinar with some of the main actors of the value chain of Brazil's value chain of agricultural production. So we are proud to represent here the Danish crown, and our investments in Brazil focused on sustainable agriculture. We want to make this increasingly relevant, and in the COP26, we agreed to the plan of combat to deforestation and other goals. However, our next step for these plans are that they are put into practice, and that is where the ADP could potentially have an important role. In Brazil, we experienced strong pressure on the part of investors and companies of the private sector for sustainable value chains and agricultural production. Soon, then Denmark will be able to share the complete plan of our rulers, and I can tell you that the soy production will be an important field of focus for us, with the goal of promoting a responsible soy productive chain free of deforestation. Also, we will continue the important work of the Norwegian and French authorities in promoting sustainable value chains for beef and leather. Another important element of the Danish crown is to incorporate the strong link with the recent regulamentation of the EU regarding deforestation. And this will provide an important mechanism for us to work for the ADP to support value chains with an impact on deforestation, especially in Brazil, where fighting deforestation is a hot topic of global concern, even for the Brazilian government. So to conclude, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for this webinar, and along with other Danish colleagues at the embassy in Copenhagen, we are excited regarding our chair in the ADP, and we want to support Brazil in developing sustainable commodities. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador, and we wish you success in the conduction of the ADP. And for us to conclude our webinar, Forest and Business, I now give the floor to the Ambassador of France in Brazil, Ms. Brigitte Collet. Good morning, Ms. Ambassador. Thank you, Fernanda. Good morning. I would like to extend my warm greetings and thanks to Vice President Mourão and to the speakers who have made the exchanges in this webinar so rich. In the presentations we had during these 2 days, we heard many messages. We heard that tracing deforestation is a technical challenge, but that tools and methodologies exist. The question is not whether it is possible to trace them, to trace deforestation, but also how to make it more precise and efficient. We have heard the example of the cattle green seal developed by the team of Professor Rajão with the Federal University of Minas Gerais. This tool has been tested in Pará. It is under test currently in Pará, and this tool would allow all of us to be sure that the beef and the leather of certified cattle would not contribute to deforestation. We have heard the commitment of a large cattle purchaser or sourcer that could have an encouraging effect on cattle producers, large and small. We also heard that it is no longer possible to hold on to a trade strategy on the one hand and the sustainability strategy on another, on the other hand. From now on, any trade strategy must be truly sustainable. We have heard of deforestation as a factor that compromises the competitiveness of products and constitutes a risk to banks and investors. Protecting forests is to protect productive chains. We heard examples of competitors who joined efforts to together eliminate deforestation in the value chains of soy, cacao, and palm oil, as well as financial support. We also heard of the importance of a shared reflection, shared among companies, but also with nonprofits and public authorities. This was precisely the purpose of this webinar, to dialogue on the elimination of deforestation in the value chains and to identify best practices to feed our common action. While the European Union is working on legislation on imported deforestation, leveraged by the Amsterdam Partnership, we want to work with all of you in this transition towards production, consumption, and investment that fully consider the factor of the environment. We have only one planet, and it is our responsibility, our common responsibility as states, companies, businesses, and citizens to protect it. Fernanda, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thank you all for your participation, and I would like to remind you that the full videos of today's and yesterday's webinars about the value chains of production and investments will be available for you on YouTube. Thank you for your company.
Muito obrigado a todas e todos. Many thanks to everyone for your participation. We were very happy to be able to hear all your testimonies, and we'll of course remain available for any questions, or if you want the YouTube link in case you don't have it. Thanks again.
Obrigada a todos. Abraço.
Obrigado.
Até sexta, Puga.
Sexta, Carol.
Tchau. Até sexta.
Bye, everybody. Tchau, obrigado.
Nice to meet you, Eric.
Nice to meet you, Eric.
Nice to meet you all. Yes, bye-bye.
Pleasure. Goodbye.